Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. It is going to be all about the Pilot Vanishing Point. I'm really looking forward to today's video all about Pilot Vanishing Point. Pilot Vanishing Point is one of our most unique, recognizable, and probably one of the most unique, recognizable, and just iconic fountain pens out there for a simple reason. It is actually a retractable fountain pen with a click mechanism. A little overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to be looking at the Pilot Vanishing Point, a little bit about the history, and a little on the history of retractable fountain pens in general. And then we're going to be looking at all of the different models of the Pilot Vanishing Point. Two very popular models, which are like the Pilot Vanishing Point, the standard model, and then probably the Decimo, but there actually are a few more on top of that that are lesser known, and some of them are really, really beautiful. So we're going to be looking at all of the different available models of a Pilot Vanishing Point and discussing how to swap nibs. Also going to be taking a look at how to fill a Pilot Vanishing Point once you actually have your VP fountain pen. In a separate video, we're going to be doing a line comparison. So here at Yoseka, we have done quite a few nib and line comparisons, which are just really comparing the different nib sizes of a pen across all of its different nib sizes. And so that is going to be available for all of you as well, but in a separate video. Without further ado, let's talk about the Pilot Vanishing Point. I have a lot of them here in front of me on the table, but this is just one of the collections, and we'll be looking at all of the different models later on in today's video. The Pilot Vanishing Point is very recognizable and it's unique because it is a capless fountain pen that has a knock. In Japan, they call the click like a knock mechanism. So it has a knock mechanism, and you can click the nib out really easily, just as you would a ballpoint pen or a rollerball pen or any pen that you have experience with. So for this reason, actually, the Pilot Vanishing Point is known as the capless fountain pen in Japan because it doesn't have a cap. It has this knock mechanism. In the US, we know it as Vanishing Point, and in Japan, it is known as capless, but those two are really quite synonymous. The Vanishing Point was released by Pilot in 1963, and Pilot boasted that it was actually the world's first capless retractable fountain pen. But in my research, I actually discovered, and through talking to friends, I actually discovered that there were a couple of predecessors of the Vanishing Point that came before the Vanishing Point. So I have to credit my good friend Barry. He is a good friend of Yoseka, and he is one of the most knowledgeable people on fountain pens that I have ever met in my life and ever met in my whole experience at Yoseka. And he's the one who told me about Aurora Astrope and Meteor Pullman. And these two pens were actually retractable fountain pens that were released in the 1930s. So about 30 years before the Pilot Vanishing Point, there were companies that were trying to develop retractable capless fountain pens, and these were two examples of the earliest models. So I was very interested to find out from Barry that actually one of the reasons for wanting to develop a retractable fountain pen in the 1930s was that a lot of the World War I veterans were coming home with only one arm and one arm amputated, and as a result they were not able to access their fountain pens very easily because, as you may know, fountain pens that have a cap are often screw caps, so you would have to unscrew the cap using two hands, or I guess if you don't have two hands, you could bite it in your mouth, but it's not like an easy process at all. So thus the need for retractable capless fountain pens was born in the 1930s. Then in the 1950s, Pilot began to develop the Vanishing Point as a way to make pens more easily accessible. So it was just a convenience thing, wanting to make the process of writing with a fountain pen a lot faster. I think this has to do with just the rise of the ballpoint pen in that same time, and the whole introduction of convenience and speed and efficiency into the writing practice was introduced from the ballpoint pen. So people were really thinking about how to make pens the most convenient, how to make them faster, how to make them more accessible during these business meetings. So Pilot in the 1950s started developing the Vanishing Point. It was released in 1963 as a slightly different version than what we know today, but we'll talk a little bit more about the different models of the Vanishing Point later on. That is a big reason why Pilot Vanishing Point is popular. I get a lot of questions about, like, why would you want a retractable fountain pen? If you're wondering that, I think most people are thinking about a retractable fountain pen for ease of use and for convenience. So it's all about just accessibility, being able to click it and write with it right away and not having to deal with where to put the cap. You know, do I post it on the back of my pen? Do I have to put it on my desk somewhere and possibly it rolls away? It's all just, this pen is contained all in one piece, and you can write with it as quickly as you would be able to write with a ballpoint pen. So that's the number one reason why somebody would think about a retractable fountain pen. And I think the number two reason, an equally valid reason, is just like the novelty factor. I think it's a really cool idea to have a retractable fountain pen, and it is a cool looking pen. We'll take a closer look at it. Here are some Pilot Vanishing Points, but we're actually going to say goodbye to them really quickly, and I'm just going to be looking at one of them just to show you all what exactly a Vanishing Point looks like. This is the Vanishing Point in black and gold, and it works like this. So this is the knock, and you simply push it, and there the nib comes out, and that is how you would begin to write with this fountain pen. Something else I want to point out is that the clip is actually located towards the bottom of the pen, which is unusual. The clip is located here where you would grip the pen. And this is something that some people complain about for the Pilot Vanishing Point. So I do recommend, if you're thinking about getting one, maybe if you are nearby a pen show, if you have a local pen shop, I recommend going into your local pen shop and just holding one in your hands before committing to this pen, because the location of that clip right in the middle of their grip, but it depends on how you hold your pen. Okay, so the clip is over here, the knock mechanism is over here, and the pen twists open from the barrel like that. This is the converter, and when you pull it out, the whole nib unit actually comes out of the pen. And along the nib, you have inscriptions and engravings, so you'll be able to see your nib size and Pilot, and all those things. And then the converter comes out like this. There is a little protrusion here on the nib unit where you want to align with the barrel, so it'll fit right in like a puzzle piece, and you feel the spring of the fountain pen, and that's how you put the pen back together. One really cool feature about the Pilot Vanishing Point that Pilot worked pretty hard to develop over the years is that they have this thing called a shutter mechanism. So the concern with a capless fountain pen is obviously it offers a lot of convenience, but one drawback could potentially be that it might dry out. So those screw caps, although they are a little bit of a hassle to open, they do keep your nibs airtight and prevent your fountain pens from drying out very quickly. So in the case of the Pilot Vanishing Point, Pilot wanted to come up with a solution to prevent air from drying out ink in a fountain pen, and they had a really, really innovative technique to do that. There's actually in these pens a little shutter mechanism, a shutter window, that as you click the fountain pen back in, the window closes up, so it seals up the little hole where the tip comes out from. And if you want to write with your fountain pen, when you click on it, the tip of the nib is actually going to push that shutter window open to let the nib come out of the window. So I'm going to try and do a close-up. that was a nice little look at one Pilot Vanishing Point. I do just want to talk about briefly like the rough timeline of Pilot's release of these Vanishing Points. So as I was saying before, the Vanishing Point was released in 1963, but interestingly, in 1963, the first model that was released was actually a rotary type capless fountain pen. So today, that is most close to Pilot's Fermo fountain pen. So here's an example of the Fermo, and this is a rotary. This is what I mean by rotary type. So they would, the very first capless fountain pen that was released in 1963 was capless and retractable from this rotating dial. So in 1963, they released the rotary type retractable fountain pen, and then it wasn't until the next year, 1964, that they released this knock type with the clicker mechanism. Because if you think about it, actually the rotating dial type, you still need two hands to operate that fountain pen. So it didn't offer the level of convenience that Pilot had set out for in the beginning. So they kept working on it, and in 1964, that's when they developed and released their knock type retractable capless fountain pen. In 1964 and the following few years, lots of different improvements were made. Improvements were made to the shutter mechanism, improvements were made to the materials of the actual body of the fountain pen, as well as the nib of the fountain pen. And then in 1998, the modern capless Vanishing Point, as we know it today, that is the version that was released with an 18-karat gold nib, a metal barrel, and an improved sort of painted coating for all of these fountain pens that would improve the durability of the fountain pen. So these modern Vanishing Points, the ones that we just looked at, were not actually released until 1998. Then in more recent years, Pilot has continued to sort of make different versions of the Vanishing Point capless pens available. In 2005, they released the Decimo, which we'll take a look at later, but that is a smaller and more lightweight version of the capless, and that was in 2005. In 2006, they released the Fermo, which we just looked at, with the rotating dial type retractability. In 2009, they released a version of the capless Vanishing Point called the LS, which stands for Luxury and Silent, which we'll take a look at later. So we're going to start with the standard Pilot Vanishing Point, or aka capless in Japan. These are the 13 pens in the trays in front of me here. This is all of the available colorways that this pen comes in. As you can see, they're pretty classic colors. There's black gold, there's black silver, blue gold and blue silver, red and gunmetal gray. These two versions are called carbonesque, so there's black carbonesque, and there's also, here is the blue carbonesque, which is really cool. It has this sort of pattern all over it, which you can actually feel. It's raised at the surface of the pen, and you can actually feel this design all over the surface of this fountain pen. So these are really cool. And then they have these matte versions. So this is blue matte, this is black matte, this is gunmetal gray and black matte, and then there's white black. So these are the 13 different standard Vanishing Point models that you can choose from, and most likely when you're looking at a Vanishing Point, it's going to be one of these models that you're looking at. The next model of the Vanishing Point fountain pens that I'm going to be talking about is the Vanishing Point Decimo. It's called Decimo because it was the 10th model that was released by Pilot within the capless series, and so Decimo in Spanish means 10. And this version is different from the full-size capless that we were looking at earlier because it is lighter weight. These are made of aluminum, whereas the other ones are made of brass, so they're much heavier, and they also have a smaller diameter, so they're better for if you have smaller hands, and much more comfortable to hold because of their lightweight aluminum barrel. The colors that the Decimo come in are right here in front of me. We have purple, we have white pearl, navy, light blue, black silver, champagne, gray, and this one is burgundy here. And for your reference, I'll do a side-by-side comparison of the full-size Vanishing Point and the smaller, lightweight Decimo. Here on the top, we have the Vanishing Point, and then here on the bottom, we actually have the Decimo. They are super close in size. Actually, they're the exact same length, but you'll hopefully be able to see that the Decimo has a smaller diameter. So it's just it's like not really, it's hard to see with your eyes, but you can feel it when you hold the pens in your hand. The Decimo is smaller, and this one is made of aluminum, whereas the Vanishing Point is made of brass. So it's got much more weight to it. So it's a matter of big and small hands, I think. The next Pilot Vanishing Point model that we're going to be talking about is the Pilot Vanishing Point SE, which was released pretty recently, actually in December of 2021 by Pilot in Japan. And here SE actually stands for SEUL, and it's a French word that means only or unique. And as you can see, these pens have this very beautiful marble pattern all over the barrel, right here. And they come in a few different, just 5 different colors. There's burgundy, blue, orange, black, and green. This marble pattern is seen across a few of different Pilot's custom fountain pens, and even on some of their ballpoint pens. It's kind of a pattern that Pilot consistently uses across a bunch of their different collections of pens and stationery for their higher end and sort of like luxury fountain pen. And these are also a metal body pen with the larger diameter. So it's the full Vanishing Point diameter, not the smaller Decimo diameter. Next up, I just have a single pen to talk about here. This one is the Pilot Vanishing Point Stripe. It has a really distinct silver stainless steel coating on it. Actually, it's stainless steel, so it doesn't really tarnish because it is stainless steel, and it is the same diameter and the same size as the Vanishing Point. But otherwise it is the same. So it has the sterling silver coating on it over the metal, with these vertical stripes that go all down, up and down the barrel of the pen. I actually really like how this one looks. It's a very classic looking fountain pen. It's just so elegant. I love how, I think the vertical stripes make it look almost slimmer in the hand. And yeah, it's quite nice. So that is the Vanishing Point Stripe. Next up, we have 3 Vanishing Points in the collection of Vanishing Point Raden pens. The Vanishing Point is definitely one of Pilot's most iconic, best known series of fountain pens, and so they have really released Vanishing Points in many different finishes, and this option, the Raden option, is just like a really luxurious art option for anybody who appreciates the art maki urushi fountain pens, and you're also a Vanishing Point capless lover. This is where those two worlds meet. And for anyone who doesn't know what Raden is, in Japanese Raden is pronounced Raden, and it is actually the use of inlaid abalone shells within the barrel of a pen, and it's often combined with urushi lacquer techniques, maki techniques, to create like a stunning pattern of artwork along the pen. But the Raden specifically is the use of the abalone shells that are one by one inlaid into the barrel of the pen by hand, which, as you can probably imagine, takes a really, really long time. It's a very time-intensive effort, and it definitely brings the pen to life. So we'll take a closer look at some of these. This one is the Pilot Vanishing Point Raden in the Galaxy pattern, in the Galaxy design. And you can see here, the really cool thing about Raden is that the abalone shells have almost a holographic reflection of light quality to them. So as you turn the pen in the light, it really looks quite nice. So that one is the Galaxy. This one is called Water Surface, with these different vertical stripes of abalone shell Raden all across the pen. We have solid stripes, and then at the beginning and the ends of each of these stripes, there's just dots. So it's dotted to solid lines. Yeah. And Raden just always adds sort of a subtle beauty to the pens, because they usually are used quite sparingly along the barrel of the pen, but they do add a nice touch. And you can almost miss these details until you hold your pen in the light. This one here is Stripe, and it's similar to the Water Surface with just a really concentrated cluster of stripes of Raden going along this middle section of the pen, all around the diameter of the pen body. So, yeah. So those are the Pilot Vanishing Point Radens. Next up, we're going to be talking about two Vanishing Point models that actually only come in Japan. They're not available here, even though I wish they were. They're so nice. These are the Birchwood Vanishing Points. As you can see here, they are solid wood, so it's lighter weight than some of the other Vanishing Points. And it's made of birch wood in this dark finish, and then in warmer red wood finish. And if you guys can feel these pens, they're so smooth. Even though they are wood, they've been polished so well, and they're really nice. So they're full-sized Vanishing Points, not the smaller Decimos, but they have a nice lightness to them because of the wood material that's been used. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about the yearly Pilot Vanishing Point limited editions that come out every year. Every year, Pilot creates limited edition Vanishing Points that are released in very special colorways. So this turquoise one is called Tropical Turquoise, and it is the limited edition from 2019. And then this one here, the Red Coral, is the version from the 2022 limited edition color. Every year, Pilot releases these super limited pens, and these are like limited, and you know they're limited because they have like a serial number on them. So when pens have a serial number on them, you know that they're super rare, and they only release a certain number of them, and then that's it. And that wraps it up for the Pilot Vanishing Point models as we know it. The other two that I'll talk about are the Vanishing Point LS and the Vanishing Point Fermo, which have a very different look than the previous Vanishing Points that we talked about. You know, the Vanishing Point SE, the Vanishing Point Classic Standard line, the Vanishing Point Raden, the Decimos. All of those, and the wood finish, all of those really have the same overall look, even though the Decimo is a little bit smaller. These that I have here on the tray in front of me are what I was talking about earlier, the Vanishing Point LS. The LS stands for Luxury and Silent. So these are still capless Vanishing Point fountain pens, but Luxury and Silent means that they are silent. So what does that mean? These pens are just a little bit longer than the standard Vanishing Points. You can probably tell that the LS is just ever so slightly longer than the Vanishing Point. And what's special about the LS is that it clicks just like the Vanishing Point would, but as the name suggests, it's silent. So you don't, when you click it back with the Vanishing Point, you get a sound. But with the LS, instead of clicking it back, which releases that spring and always creates that sound, you turn this dial back, and ever so quietly it releases the knock and the tip of the pen retracts back into the body like that. So I think that the reason for these pens' existence is probably because in Japan, I can imagine like in business meetings, people are very conscious about not having a very clicky pen. If the idea of a silent pen really appeals to you, then you should look at the Vanishing Point LS. Here are all of the colors that a Vanishing Point LS comes in. So there's blue, matte black, black, and burgundy. The last model in the Vanishing Point lineup of fountain pens that I'm going to be talking about today is the Vanishing Point Fermo. The Fermo, I had given you all a little peek earlier, but the Fermo is a more modern version of one of the first ever Vanishing Point that was released in 1963, which was that rotating dial version. So the Fermo, instead of clicking, it actually retracts via this rotating dial. So it doesn't give you the convenience of clicking with a single hand, but it still gives you the convenience of not having to deal with a cap. So it is still pretty fast. And I really like these. They're slimmer pens, so they're slimmer than the full-size Vanishing Points. And I think that they're around the same diameter as the Decimos. Unfortunately, they're not available here in the US, but personally, I quite like them. We wanted to include them in today's video because just in order to give you all a very comprehensive view of what is fully available and a path that Vanishing Point capless fountain pens have really taken over the last 60 years since its release, we wanted to include all of these pens, even if they're not fully available here in the US. Now that we've looked at all of the different models of the capless fountain pens, I want to point out that one of my favorite parts of the Vanishing Point fountain pens is that all of them actually use the same nib unit. If you open any of your Vanishing Points, they will have this nib unit inside, and they will take a Con 40 or a Pilot cartridge. No matter what pen you have, you can use this nib, which is unusual for any gold nib fountain pen, especially in Japan. I would say most gold nib fountain pens that are Japanese do not come with interchangeable nibs, and you can't get spare nibs for them. But that's where the Vanishing Point is different. So you can actually get just the nib for these and just switch out your nib size, or if you want to replace an old nib that's gotten like worn down over the years, you can just get a nib, and they come out super easily. The nibs also come in a few different colors. They come in black, gold finish, and also rhodium finish. The black one comes in everything from extra fine to stub. The rhodium comes in extra fine to stub, and then the gold actually just comes in 3 nib sizes: fine, medium, and stub. In Japan, they actually have another nib size altogether called fine medium, which we will be incorporating into our line comparison video later on, but in the US, it's just 5 nib sizes. So that is what's really cool about the Pilot capless Vanishing Point pens, is that they all utilize the same nib, even if it's the Luxury and Silence, even if it's the Fermo, the Decimo, or the Vanishing Point, you will all be able to use the same nib. In this part of the video, I'm going to be showing you how to fill a Pilot Vanishing Point. When you get your Pilot Vanishing Point pen, the pen is going to look like this, and unlike most pens, you actually have to open this one up to fill it. So you're going to unscrew the top knock section off of the pen, and be careful when you're doing so because the nib section just completely slides out like that, and I have dropped a nib before. You want to angle it upright so that it doesn't slide out, and then from there your nib section will just completely come out of the pen like that. And over here is where you'll find a Con 40 converter, which you can plug into your nib unit like that. To fill the pen, you're going to have to dip this part into the bottle of ink that you're using, and you're going to have to submerge it up to the hole over here, because this is where the ink will be drawn into the pen through this hole over here. So today I'll be using Pilot Iroshizuku Take Sumi, which is a really nice black ink. I'm going to dip this whole thing into the bottle of ink, submerging this hole over here into the bottle. You're gonna lower the piston just by twisting on it, just like that. Dip the nib into the bottle of ink and twist on it the other way to draw the ink up. And I like to do it 2 times because I find the first one, I don't know, there's an air bubble, so it doesn't get as full as I normally would like it. So if you tilt it back the other way, you can confirm that there is indeed ink in the converter. You take some paper towel, wipe off the nib, and just like that, it goes really easily back into your fountain pen just the way that you took it out, with putting this little knob and fitting it into that slot there, lining them up, and twisting on your other part of the barrel. I'm going to click the nib out, and you can begin writing. It is a really soft nib, and like most Pilot nibs, it's really smooth. But I think that is about it for today's video, all about Pilot Vanishing Points. We talked a little bit about the history behind retractable fountain pens, and then the timeline of Pilot's Capless Vanishing Point fountain pens. Looked at all of the different possible models that you could choose from for the Pilot Vanishing Point, and showed you how to fill your Pilot Vanishing Point. In our next video, we're going to be doing a nib and line comparison, so be sure to look out for that one. I hope you enjoyed this video on this super iconic fountain pen that I get asked about all the time in the store, and let us know in the comments which of the Pilot VPs is your favorite. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!